Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to Lunch and Learn. Look who's here. It's Charlie Albright.
Hello.
Join us. I'm glad you're enjoying your lunch. Now comes the learn part. We're going to talk about the concert that's happening this Friday, and in fact also a concert that's happening on Saturday. But beforehand, I want to reintroduce you to Charlie. How many of you got to hear Charlie play when he was here last time? Can I see? Okay, so less than half of you. They're in for a nice treat. Let's first introduce you a little bit, or have you learn a little bit about Charlie's background. So Charlie, tell everybody about yourself.
Hi, I'm Charlie, and I play the piano. I think this will be my third time here with the West Michigan Symphony.
I think so.
And it's always wonderful to be back in Muskegon. I grew up in a small town south of Seattle, about an hour and a half south, called Centralia. And I started piano when I was about 3 years old, played by ear only. And I took from various teachers, from jazz teachers to just people that taught me to play entirely by ear. One of them was a lady who owned a piano and organ store in the little swap meet mall down the street. And eventually one teacher said to my parents that instead of playing only the fun songs, is what I called them, I needed a year's worth of classical training to develop my technique. And so he introduced me to Nancy Etz, who became my very influential teacher, who I worked with until I went to college. And that's when I learned classical music and how to read music and all of that. And so I play the piano.
So that's how it got started. And by the way, Karen, up there we have Karen in place of Gabe running sound for us. If you're able to turn the mics down a tiny bit, that would be great. So you ended up going to college, which was Harvard. Am I right about that? Yeah. And tell us about your musical journey from that point on.
Yeah. So
because you did at some point decide that you wanted to actually do this for a living and not just for
that
fun.
is true.
And
that
not just
true.
by ear.
My family growing up, I wasn't wealthy. I didn't have a trust fund, anything like that. So I knew that regardless of, how much you love to play music, a lot of it is whether you're successful in music or not. Just like any kind of arts or entertainment, really, is not just how much you practice, but it's a lot of other things that are outside of your control, from having the right people hear you at the right time to God's blessing to having just all kinds of things have to kind of line up. And even then, it's very difficult. But I figured, well, if I couldn't do music, what would I want to do then? And so I was thinking, well, I was always interested in medicine and business, and so I ended up doing a joint program with Harvard and the New England Conservatory. It's a joint bachelor's, master's in music. So my bachelor's I did I majored in economics and worked on Wall Street for an internship and hated it. And that tipped it a little bit more toward the music side.
How old were you at this point? Was this right after undergrad, or
it was during undergrad?
During.
And I was doing music the entire time, and more performing. So a lot of my college career was spent, away from school on weekends in a hotel room, doing my homework before my concert, and then emailing it in, and then going to class on the weekdays. And I realized eventually that, music was a passion, and the other stuff was, strong interests of mine. But I wanted to go toward to the music side more. So after I graduated, I applied for postgrad work and did my artist diploma down in New York at Juilliard, and did that, and I played the piano.
I've worked with Charlie many times, not just here, so we've gotten to know each other quite a bit, and we're kind of I feel like we're kind of kindred spirits in some ways. One of the ways being that the sharing the love of what we do is as important, or if not even more important, than doing what we do well, right? And the sharing, the joy and the passion of it, and having that really exude from the stage is something that it is a huge hallmark of your playing that everyone really, really enjoys. And also, Charlie is so open to learning new concertos. We just recently in Mobile worked together. We played the Saint-Saëns Concerto No. 2, which I think was the first time you had done it. So you learned it just to be able to do it together, which was amazing. This time, Charlie is going to be performing a piece by Rachmaninoff, and I think you probably know, but let me just give a little background on why that is. This concert is an audience choice concert, and we decided to have a little experiment where during all last season we had sort of a little poll, on paper that people could fill out in our program book, and we offered for the opening concert of this season, opening Masterworks concert, that we would play an overture, a concerto with Charlie, and a symphony, and each of those would be the audience's choice. And what we did, first of all, make sure that it was going to be a piece that would work. We asked Charlie to recommend 3 concertos, which you did. Do you remember what the other 2 were, by any chance?
I think Shostakovich 2 was one of them. And originally I had put, I think, Rhapsody in Blue, but you had played that
We
recently.
had recently done it,
so
yeah.
So instead of that, I think I put, was it Grieg Concerto?
I think maybe it was.
But we have played that together here, I think, a time or 2 ago.
Yes, the first time.
I think those were the 3.
Those were the 3. So we had 3 concertos listed. We also had 3 symphonies listed, all of them quite well known, and 3 overtures listed, all of them quite well known. And the idea was that the audience would choose one from column A, one from column B, one from column C, like a Chinese menu. And the votes were overwhelming. I had an inkling that the Rachmaninoff Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini would be the piano piece that the audience would choose. But I didn't have as much of an inkling about the other 2 pieces because, as I said, the overtures were all popular and so were the symphonies. But we ended up with the Rossini William Tell Overture and the Dvorak New World Symphony, and in between them, Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini. This is a freaking masterpiece. And Rachmaninoff, like Charlie, was a piano virtuoso who wrote a lot of stuff for the purpose of himself being able to play it. He had an extremely successful American tour, for example, and eventually ended up moving to America and had a lot of his music premiered in America, including this piece, right? Wasn't it first done in... no, I'm not actually sure. I may be wrong about that. Anyway, tell us about a little bit about the background, what you know of this piece.
This piece has... It's called the Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini. There's different versions of this piece. You might have heard the violin version playing it. The main theme basically just goes, and it does that a few times, and then it goes.
So this was a Paganini caprice. He had written many, many caprices for solo violin. Paganini lived a long time before Rachmaninoff. I believe in the 1700s. Am I right about that? And early 18. Anyway, Niccolò Paganini, great violin virtuoso, who also wrote stuff for himself to play. And many composers have been inspired to take this somewhat simple melody and write a series of variations on it. Brahms has his Paganini variations. And even as recently as in the 20th century, Lutosławski, the great Lutosławski, Polish composer, has a set of Paganini variations. So it's the kind of thing that has been very fertile for people to use in their own way. And Sergei Rachmaninoff is so incredibly clever, like diabolically clever in what he writes, that he was able to create a set of variations that you can always hear the theme, or you can always hear the outline of the theme, or at least the harmony of the theme. Maybe you can demonstrate some of the variations for it?
Sure. There are a lot of them. Do you remember how many there are? I don't. There's a
20,
lot.
24?
Something like that.
Something like
There's a
24.
lot, and they go all from one straight into the other with very little, if any. Some of them don't have any breaks in between. Some of them have a slight breath. They start off simple. The first few kind of go. Literally, this is all I play in one of them. By far the hardest part of the entire piece.
But do you hear that? You hear the outline of the theme? Right? Okay.
And then it gets more and more complicated.
more. You hear that? Yeah. Now, in the midst of all this, Rachmaninoff adds, because he can and because he almost always does, a very famous Gregorian chant called the Dies Irae. Do you know this? Can you play the Dies Irae for them to hear?
Is that one?
When you hear that melody, be aware that's from the old, very old Latin Requiem Mass for the Dead, talking about the day of rage, day of wrath. Rachmaninoff was obsessed with death, and he was also obsessed with the Russian Orthodox Church and their melodies. And so this gets turned into a variation of Paganini because it works with the same harmonies. Does that make sense? And you'll hear that many times throughout the whole piece. Now, the most amazing moment to me is the variation that you probably all know, but you don't know that it's a variation. And that is the 18th? 18th. The 18th. You want to talk about that a little bit?
So the 18th one is where he takes the... and he flips it upside down to get... which is a very famous theme.
Isn't that amazing? It's just an inversion. He just turns it upside down. Maybe play a little bit more.
I'll play that one. Actually, should I play the one directly before it and that one?
Yeah.
Because the one before it, it almost sounds like a graveyard. It's very ominous, eerie, kind of meandering, almost Halloween-esque kind of sounding thing. And then at the end of it, it suddenly opens up into this beautiful variation. I'll play the two if that's...
Yeah, it's great. And that moment is like an oasis in the middle of this sometimes diabolical sounding piece. There's this just angelic middle section. And also, Rachmaninoff was not dumb. He knew that this was going to be a popular variation, and he actually said, this one is for my manager, because he knew it would make a lot of money. That's good.
Here are those two, 17 and 18.
Well, yeah. So first of all, amazing, right? It's perfect music. Rachmaninoff is. I mean, Charlie's great, but Rachmaninoff is great. You know, I mean, he's just such an incredible combination of the best of the late Romantic, 19th century Russian music, but lived well into the 20th century, into the 1940s. You know, and so his music, interestingly, very similar to John Williams in our time, was not taken seriously by the classical music establishment at first because he was not considered groundbreaking. He didn't invent a whole new style. What he was an incredible, unbelievable high-level exponent of an earlier style. And it was only decades later that Rachmaninoff got the respect that he deserved from the classical music establishment. The audience, on the other hand, loved him from the beginning, right? What's not to love about this? This piece, when it was first performed, immediately went into the standard repertoire of the piano and has never left it. It's amazing. The very last variation is a lot faster. And this is the one that I think used to be called the whiskey variation or something like that, because Rachmaninoff would always take a swig of whiskey before playing this one. It's the one that goes da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee. Yeah, and so I just thought a lot of people have trouble making this sound easy. We're blessed to have Charlie. It's not supposed to sound easy, and it isn't. Maybe show it in slow motion so they can see what you have to do. So you see that the low note stays the same, but each time you have to jump more. At a time. Whoa. Can you play a tiny bit more? Yeah, go ahead. All right, yeah, don't want to give away the ending. All right. Just unbelievable stuff. And this was, even for Rachmaninoff, maybe the greatest pianist of all time, by the way. Maybe. You can hear his recordings. Incredible. Even for him, this was considered a challenging variation. And he put that for himself after 23 other variations, which is just crazy. The very ending of the piece, will give you a little insider information. The end of the piece gives me chills. Because you think it's going to end really loud and fast like every other Rachmaninoff piece, right? And he's so clever. Maybe you can play it for them so they have some insider knowledge.
Where should I start? Remember it in my head.
Anyone mind if he does that? Okay. Thank you. I'm really sorry to ask you to do that so early in the day, and because we're good friends, you'll forgive me, but I'm sorry. Charlie just flew for over 13 hours, is that right?
I flew in from Korea yesterday.
Tell us a little what you were doing there.
So yeah, so I've been traveling a lot lately. This past year I spent about half the year in Korea over the course of 4 trips, giving all kinds of touring there. So this past month I was there for about 4 or 5 weeks. I gave 10 concerts around the country there, including the biggest concert I think I ever gave in front of audience-wise. Because most of the time concert halls max out. Even big concert halls are often 1,500 to 2,000. Maybe you might nudge over a couple thousand, but at a certain point, it becomes too big to actually hear without amplification and whatnot. And most classical music is, acoustic without amplification. But I gave one concert there, an outdoor one, with like 3,500 people out in the audience, which is kind of neat. It's the biggest I played at.
Wow, very cool.
We did Rhapsody in Blue there.
Perfect. Oh, how wonderful. And your mom is from Korea, right?
My mom is from Korea,
Yeah.
and so is my wife.
I see. So yeah. So and you speak fluent Korean,
I do,
right?
yeah.
In addition to obviously being American. So how cool. So that's that piece. The concert also has 2 other big pieces of music, big in terms of audience appeal. Rossini's William Tell Overture is such a delight. It has 4 different sections. The first one has a beautiful cello solo, and in fact, it's a section pretty much only for 5 cellos, each of which is playing a solo, but all together. The second part is a thunderstorm, and that is really, really prominent for its trombone line, which is on every trombone audition. So the orchestra goes da 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 dee da 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 da, and then the trombones go ba 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 ba. And that happens about 6 times. And then the third part is very, very pastoral, and you've certainly heard this melody. Dee da 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 da, dee da da dee da da. If anyone ever saw Bambi versus Godzilla, that's the theme. Very, very fun little short cartoon. And the fourth part, you obviously know because everyone now knows it since it was used as the theme from The Lone Ranger. And the great, great, wonderful joy that I have whenever I conduct the Rossini William Tell Overture is hearing the gasp from the audience at that moment, because most people don't know that it's the same piece. They love it. I can't wait for that. So I'm not going to introduce it in any way. I'm not going to. But you have the insider of the scoop. Then Dvorak's New World Symphony. Let me just give you a tiny bit of background here. Antonin Dvorak lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I think it was just after the turn of the century that he was already one of the most famous, if not the most famous, living composer in Europe. A wealthy socialite in New York named Mrs. Jeanette Thurber decided to start a conservatory of music. I think it was called the National Conservatory of Music at the time in New York City. And of course, she wanted the most famous composer in the world to come and teach composition. So she called up, or mailed, I guess, Antonin Dvorak, who was living in Bohemia, what is now the Czech Republic. He spent a lot of his time in Prague. Well, Antonin Dvorak was very, very much of a homebody in terms of really staying in his native Bohemia, and he didn't want to come to America. So he refused her offer. Then she quadrupled the offer, and he accepted. So he came, and he ended up spending 4 years living in America, which is quite amazing to me, living in America as the teacher of composition at the National Conservatory of Music, hired by Mrs. Jeanette Thurber. He was extremely homesick the whole time. He spent his summers in a Bohemian colony, I guess you'd say, in Spillville, Iowa. So he spent his summers in the Midwest. But during the school year, he was in New York. And what he did with the students is not at all what Jeanette Thurber had hoped he would do. She had hoped he would teach everyone how to write music in the European style so that they could be on the same, with nose in the air, the same plane as the European composers. But what he did was the opposite. He said, you don't need to take other people's musical ideas. You have the basis here for great music in America by using American musical elements and motives. And the examples he gave were the African American spiritual and Native American Indian music. And he proceeded to try to show the composition students what was possible by doing that himself. So the result was his Symphony No. 9, the New World Symphony, which I think is the greatest symphony ever written in America. I'm sorry that it wasn't written by an American, but there you have it. It's an incredible symphonic work. It's up there with all the great symphonies of Brahms, for example. In fact, Brahms was a big fan. Brahms was the one who got him his publisher and really promoted him and made him a star, a compositional star. So this piece has 4 movements, and Karen is going to play a little bit for us of each one. The beginning of the first movement is extremely atmospheric and rather slow, and you wouldn't necessarily know that we're talking about America here, but let's listen to the beginning. Hear the little musical idea or motive that becomes the basis for the whole first movement. And it's this right here. Okay. Rising and falling motive. Okay, so that's the main theme of the first movement. Very easy to catch. Thank you very much, Karen. So, and the whole first movement from this point on is quite fast. It's an allegro, and to start a symphony with a adagio or a slow introduction and followed by an allegro is extremely common. That is the basis of classical symphonies a lot of the time. Now, the second movement, he absolutely wanted to be based on an African American spiritual feel. As far as we know, he wrote this melody. And after a very short introduction, you'll hear this melody, played by the English horn, which is a lower, bigger version of an oboe. Okay? But before that, you're going to hear 7 chords. The purpose of these 7 chords is to get us from the key of the first movement into the key of the second movement, is what they call a modulation. That 7-chord progression later becomes a theme that comes back at least 2 or 3 times in the symphony. But what is notable about this is that the 7 notes here and the 7 notes just like it at the end of the movement are the only 14 notes that the tuba plays in the entire New World Symphony. So that's an expensive proposition. Luckily, he's playing the other pieces too. All right, so let's play the beginning of the second movement. See how he cleverly got us into a different key? he chose this key because it's really, really good for the English horn. And you know the rest. So we'll fade out here. Fun fact, he does not write a separate English horn part for a separate player. He puts it in the second oboe part, which is dangerous because the second oboist isn't always necessarily a good English horn player. In our particular case, for our other music anyway, we need a separate dedicated English horn player, so we're letting her play this solo as well. The third movement is the one where I most question, is this really American? Does this really sound like Native American Indian wedding feast or something like that, like Hiawatha's wedding or something like that, which is what I think he was aiming for? I don't know. Let's listen to the beginning of the third movement. And it goes on like that. Thank you. It goes on like that, and there's two other very major melodies that are extremely hummable. And that's the thing about Antonin Dvorak, and one reason we love him, as well as loving Rachmaninoff, and loving Rossini for that matter, is that they all wrote hummable, recognizable melodies. And that is a lost art. It's really, really hard to do that, which is why you don't hear it a lot in modern music. It's not that people aren't trying. It's just that the ones that have come down to us are the ones that have succeeded, because to be a master of writing a melody is an incredible art and talent. The one who has it the most right now is John Williams, honestly. I feel in symphonic music, anyway. The fourth movement kind of ingeniously marries all the themes of all the movements together, but it has its own theme too, which we hear near the beginning. Actually, the very beginning is the first, maybe the second piece of music that was written that really reminds me, or that could have been used as an inspiration for, I bet you have no idea what I'm about to say, for the Jaws theme. Okay, let's listen to the beginning of the fourth movement. And it goes on like that. Just incredible. I'm so glad you picked this piece. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a joy for us. We had an extremely joyous rehearsal last night, and we will tonight as well. And Charlie will join us in rehearsal as well for the Rachmaninoff. I will say about the Dvorak, I really question how American this piece sounds in general. Even the second movement, with its obviously spiritual theme, feels to me like a Czech composer who's homesick for Bohemia. And And that's fine because you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. Just as in the same way, Rachmaninoff sounds Russian, like Imperial Russian, no matter where he was, even when he was writing in Hollywood at the end, or when he was writing his symphonic dances, which he wrote in America. That's great. The personality of the composer stays intact wherever they are. And of course, they have influences. You could hear in the rock, or you will hear in the Rachmaninoff, some jazz influences. But he never became truly American. He was always, he was a reluctant immigrant. He really was very much Russian at heart. Dvorak was very much Bohemian at heart. After the 4 years in New York, he said, "That's enough, thank you very much," and he went back and happily spent the rest of his life in Bohemia. And Rossini, of course, very Italian, and that's a whole nother story. Sometime when we're doing a longer piece of Rossini, I'll tell you longer stories about him, how he spent the last 30 years of his life not writing any music, just eating and drinking and having a wonderful life. Rossini once said, "Eating, drinking, love, and music are the 4 great pleasures of life," and he said it in that order. All right. So now, the following night, Saturday night, Charlie is going to play right here, and I took a look at the seating chart. It's very, very full, but there's one little section right here. There's a swath of seats right here that haven't been sold yet. And, I would think after today it's going to be completely sold out. But if you haven't already, please get your tickets, 7:30 on Saturday. Tell us a little what you're going to be doing there.
Yeah, so on Saturday I'll be doing a recital, so just the piano, no orchestra. And I wanted to kind of keep it light and fun, so I was thinking what to play. And so there's this kind of a tentative program there, but it's very subject to change because why not? It's kind of the motto I've been going by lately. So what I'd like to do is kind of incorporate some classical music along with some of what I had mentioned earlier as being fun songs other than classical. So one thing that I really love doing is improvising. And sometimes it's improvising a cover of a piece that's already been written, and other times it's making an entire sonata on the spot. And oftentimes I'll get notes from the audience to do that, and I'll sometimes do a 3-movement piece.
Let me just clarify what you mean by that. Get notes from the audience, like C sharp, A flat, like you yell out a note, and then he'll turn that into a melody, right?
Yeah. And then use that melody to. Sometimes I'll do it. I think last time I was here, I did a full. It might have been here. A full 30-minute sonata based on kind of 3 or 4 notes with a few movements. I'm not sure if we'll do a full-length one or we'll do a few small ones, but I'll do some of that, and also some pieces I've been playing lately. I've been doing a lot of Gershwin solo. So, like in Korea, a few days ago, I played an entire Gershwin program. I did the 3 preludes by Gershwin and some of his more popular songs, Embraceable You and The Man I Love and things like that. So I think I'll throw some of that in there as well. And then maybe if we're feeling fun, we'll do a little Blue Danube transcription by Schultz-Evler, who's a fellow that basically, whenever you hear the word transcription, technically it means rewrite, because it's a piece that's written for the orchestra by Strauss, not for the piano at all. But in reality, transcription usually means add a ton of notes. And so that's a fun version that I like to play sometimes. So maybe we'll do a little of that and just kind of play it by ear.
Phenomenal. I've heard so many of Charlie's encores and pieces. And as you know, as I hope you know, when we have a concert in here, you say recital, but it's more like a coffee house atmosphere. You'll be sitting like this. You're going to have the opportunity in between pieces to ask questions, to have a conversation. It's very much a back and forth. We're never just playing at you. I feel that way in the Frauenthal as well, but especially here with the motto for the musically curious, which is just a great motto, and that's really true about this place. We have a few minutes, so I especially wanted to leave time today because this is such an interesting man here, and I hope you have some good questions for him, and I'm also happy to answer questions. So what have you got? The more embarrassing, the better. Here you go.
I'm not sure how. I know he's known as having a big span. Off the top of my head, I don't know it. 12.
An octave and a
not
fifth.
Not as big as that. Mine a normal size hands, so I can you can maybe a tenth or something if you really stretch, but they're not as big as Rachmaninoff's were, which were apparently massive.
So a lot of pianists with small hands play Rachmaninoff, and the way they do it is by staggering, right? Like this. But he could play a whole big chord as a block chord, right? Quite amazing.
Yes, yes. Did you have a second question, you said? Oh, getting into Juilliard. You apply, and then you go and do an audition, and then I got in. I was there for my artist diploma, so that's like a postgraduate program. So my year, it's the hardest thing about an artist diploma program at Juilliard is getting in. Once you're in, you can basically do whatever you want for 2 years. You have lessons and stuff. I was gone a lot because I was touring, so I was away from school a lot. But when I was there, I took the classes I wanted and then teaching. But I think my year there were 3 pianists in the program. Sometimes, usually there's maybe 5 or 6 musicians total among all instruments per year that get into the program. So it's very small. So getting in is the hard part, but once you're in, you can basically just do whatever you want.
And who is your main teacher there?
Veda Kaplinsky there.
Oh, very good.
And then at NEC, I was with Park Young-jun, and then Mrs. Adzik before that.
So 3 main teachers in your life.
Yes.
Wow, interesting.
What did I play for my? I don't even remember. I think you have to offer up a whole ton of things. I think all the Chopin Opus 25 etudes were on there. I think I had a Bach Prelude and Fugue and some sonata, maybe Haydn or something, and then some contemporary piece. Maybe it was Menotti or something. Yeah, they usually have a big list of stuff you have to have. You have to prepare, then they'll choose on the spot, play this, and play that, and play that. And then...
Which is, by the way, that's how we do our orchestra auditions. For example, today we have percussion auditions, and we gave them a big list. They have to come with everything prepared, and we don't have time to listen to everyone play everything. So for the preliminary part, we choose maybe 5 representative pieces, or maybe even 3. And based on that, we cut the list of players way down to the finalists or the semifinalists. And we still probably don't ask them every single thing on the list. So that is normal, yeah. There was another question.
Yeah, so I think it was hardest on my teacher, Mrs. Adsit, who had to force me to, to learn the notes and not just listen to a recording or something and just play it from that. But, I'm still not the world's, for me, I've noticed that in general there's kind of 2 types of people musician-wise. There's people who can sight read great, and there's people who suck at sight reading. I'm the latter. I'm terrible at sight reading.
I was too.
I still am. Unless it's something very simple, like maybe more classical, very straightforward stuff, then I can kind of slowly play it. But otherwise, I'm counting ledger lines and writing in notes and everything like that. But on the other hand, the memorization comes more quickly for me. So it takes forever to learn the notes, but once I can play it up to speed, I can memorize it quickly. I found that other people are oftentimes the opposite. So the people that, not everyone, but in general, some people you can set down like the Paganini variations. They've never played it before, and they'll be like, oh, I'll just play it, and they'll just start playing it, and it's crazy. And I think for those people, maybe the memorization comes a little bit more slowly. I don't know, but for me, I'm very bad at sight reading, so maybe that's one of the things. I'm not sure.
But doing stuff by ear, I always thought is fascinating, because when you come, and I'm sure you are all going to come on Saturday, when you come to that, you'll be really amazed at how on the spot he can take the notes that you just gave him and turn them into something not only intelligible but beautiful and coherent from beginning to end. And my question is, and I think you might have answered this once before, do you have like a whole library of musical gestures from which you can draw at the moment, or are you truly inventing each new phrase as it happens?
Oh, that's a good question. I think so. I've been kind of, when I've gotten that question, I've kind of compared it with playing with Legos. So you don't reinvent the wheel when you are either composing or when you're improvising a piece on the spot. You can imagine having a big box of Legos of different shapes and sizes of Lego bricks, and you'll think, okay, I want to build a house or a boat or a car. You don't sit there and, oh, I don't have a red 2x3 brick, so I'm going to like cut it and then paint it a different color. You take what you have and then you see how you can make it fit, so to make it into that whole master plan that you have. So that's kind of how it is. You're not necessarily reinventing everything. You might have musical ideas or modulations or chord progressions that you can kind of pull from, but you aren't actually thinking, okay, I'm going to go from a C to an F to a G7 to a 4 to a 2. You can't do that. So you're kind of just, having a big picture and then pulling things out of the box and then making it work.
Fascinating. Other questions? Yes, you first. That's interesting. Well, it makes sense. It makes sense in one particular way. That piece is really connected to the earth. And it is, in fact, Adoration of the Earth is the name of the first part of The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky. And I think that is a hallmark of many indigenous cultures. And so it makes a really nice segue into American or Native American music. Also, Stravinsky, when writing that, was not trying to sound particularly, quote, Russian. He was just trying to sound primal. And so that has a great universality to it. Yeah, good question. I think we have time. There was one more here, and I think we just have time for one more.
Me? Oh, yeah. I for a while. So if you guys are on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube and Instagram and all that stuff. So sometimes I'm focusing mainly on YouTube more than Instagram, but sometimes I'll do like these live streams where I, basically practicing the piano, but with an audience, and people ask questions and stuff. I haven't done one of those in a while, but it's not necessarily because I don't want to. It's just that I haven't really had a chance to do a live one. Any practice? I have a 2-year-old daughter, and any time that I have, any few minutes that I have, I just need to quickly practice and get it into my fingers. So I haven't been doing a live stream, kind of a long session like that in a while, but maybe in the future again. So the question is, with my busy schedule, how do I practice? That's a great question. I'm not sure. Not as much as I'd like to, but I try to prioritize sleeping too. But whenever I can, and when I do practice, I oftentimes don't have the luxury of having several hours at a time with just I can just sit and whatever. So you might only have a few minutes here or there, so I go and it's very targeted practicing, spots that I know that, are more difficult or that I need to get into my fingers or whatever. So it's very, very kind of intentional, targeted practicing.
That actually probably accomplishes a lot, I would think, doing it that way, rather than just having this vast swath of time and not having any goals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know how they say if you want something done, ask a busy person, because they're able to target like that.
I hope you're right.
I hope you're right. We'll find out on Friday and Saturday. Everybody, thank you so much. We'll see you both Friday and Saturday. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.